Today I got assaulted by a waiter over tips. Waiters, waitresses, what are your tipping horror stories? I used to work as a waitress throughout high school. We had one lone man come in the afternoon who was particularly difficult. He complained that there was nothing on the menu that he wanted to eat and our prices were too expensive. After patiently trying to give him suggestions of popular dishes or specials, he tried to negotiate the prices on things, offering to pay half of the price listed on the menu. I told him that I wasn't authorized to make changes to the prices on the menu, but that I would get my manager to come over and speak with him. After him trying to dicker with my manager, who is also extremely patient, she told him simply that the prices listed were the prices that they charge for the food, and if he wasn't happy with the selection or pricing, there were plenty of other restaurants in town he could eat at. He ended up ordering something off the menu. I served him pleasantly and promptly, and brought him his bill. When I came back to get payment from him, he left the exact change for his bill on the table. He then took a nickel, spit on it, told me that was my tip and threw it on the ground under the table. I told my manager and she escorted him out of the restaurant, told him he wasn't welcome at her restaurant anymore. TLDR. Despite pleasant and prompt service, customer spits on a nickel and throws it on the ground for me for my tip. If you don't want a tip, for whatever reason, that's fine. It's optional. But please don't spit on nickels and throw them. It's disrespectful. Closer to mental illness than disrespect. Imo. Weird. The restaurant I work at has a rule that you are never to comment or respond to the tip other than to thank the customer because it's tacky and rude. I recognize that a tip is always optional, which makes me work harder to prove I'm worth the extra money. My tipping horror story is the sweet elderly woman who left me a generous tip, but forgot to actually pay the bill. Thought that counts, right? By far my best tipping experience was an 11-man bachelor party. Filet mignon and scotch for those classy gentlemen. Tipped about 40%. Though not expected. Generosity is appreciated. Not sure if this counts. Was at a bachelor party in New Orleans. We went to a very nice steakhouse and one of the guys in our group was a complete butthole. He cussed loudly and frequently in a quiet atmosphere. He then had a bottle sent to two girls who were sitting near us. They politely declined since they weren't drinking. He stood up and yelled, "Freak, you stuck up." The manager came out. We managed not to get thrown out, mostly by the groom's brother grabbing the butter. When our meal arrived, he complained that the meat was select and not choice as advertised. He actually might have been right, but he got up and went into the kitchen to yell and complain to the chef. We came running back being chased by a very angry Italian. After that we were asked to leave. He yelled and cussed the entire way out. I've never wanted to murder someone as much as this moment. The groom had to restrain me and his brother from attacking him. After we were on the street, the butthole continued his rant. The brother and I went back inside, each gave the waiter $100 and apologized to basically everyone we could see. The girls, the chef, the manager act. I've never been so embarrassed in my life. I have never and hope to never associate myself with someone like that. Public rudeness is a height of disgust for me. A girl I was working with was waiting on a table of gentlemen who racked up a pretty hefty bill. As most waiters do, she assumed the tip would be fat and was gloating about it the whole meal, printing out the ticket, bragging to other waiters about her upsells, etc. So the men pay out, get up and leave. She walks over, grabs the book off the table, looks at it, and immediately slams it back on the table. She walks up to bar where I'm working and begins ranting about how these stupid mother suckers just stiffed me on $250. She starts insulting their southern drawls, calling them rednecks and accusing them of being poor. The whole time, she was completely oblivious to the fact that the head of the party was at the bar asking me for change on a $100 bill. I give him his change, not knowing it was a guest, and he walks down to the end of the bar where she is still ranting about him, throws $80 in front of her and says, "I used to be a waiter and I hated having to break $100 bills for customers. I was trying to save you a step on a busy night." He then turns around and walks out, leaving this stupid little girl to cry and moan when she finally realized what an butthole she was for using preconceived notions to judge this guy who was one of those rare people that every waiter loves to wait on. The best part about getting out of the industry isn't the fact that I don't have to deal with customers anymore. It's that I don't have to listen to waiters be every shift because they take everything so goddamn personally all the time. Whoa, that's a stand-up guy for still actually leaving her with the $80 tip. I probably wouldn't have called the cops. I would have asked the waitress to walk back to the table with you, ideally with the manager as well. Pick up the $10, show it to her, put it back in your pocket, demand a refund for your meal, and leave the restaurant and never return. That's the kind of thing I have all planned out in my head, all suave to do, but end up sputtering and stuttering my way as the fear of confrontation runs through me and I end up running out of the restaurant without saying anything and then cry in my car. Not a horror story, but yeah, one of my friends was back from the Marines. We went out just 4 friends. We had a bar to ourselves, and he racked up a 50.00 tab. He tipped 100.00. The bartender tried to give it back and say he really didn't wanna accept that, and my drunk friend grabs the bill and says too bad and signs it, then runs out the door. The bartender just stands there with a big ol' WTF gape on his face. I just laughed and told him he could buy us a couple beers the next night if he wanted. My friend left before we went back to that bar, but the bartender gave me a few free drinks the next few times I went in. Bonus. I have nothing to add, but your friend sounds awesome. I imagine him running out it all like Zoidberg. I was at a restaurant picking up a carry-out. I left $0 tip. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's customary to leave a tip for carry-out. Anyways, the guy was angry. He shoved me and crushed the carry-out boxes. Next day I returned and complained to the manager. They settled with me by reimbursing my meal. I used to work at a sub and steak shop across from a hospital. A lot of the doctors and other staff would order food daily, and since they were always busy I would walk the food over to them. Everyone tipped really well except for this one doctor, and one time he actually shorted me because he didn't want to break a hundo. So after that I made sure not to be in any hurry, actually taking about 20 extra minutes to stand outside in the snow and finish a smoke. On the other hand, me and my friend would always go to Waffle House after midnight showings of movies. One night I only had enough for my bill and no tip. Our waitress not only dealt with me and my friend but also a large group of drunk college guys hitting on her and being very rude. I felt so bad that the next night I went back hoping she was working, and she was. I walked up and said, "You probably don't remember me, but last night we stiffed you on the tip." She replied, "Actually I do." She didn't seem angry, just disappointed. So I handed her a 20 spot. She said it was the sweetest thing anyone had done. I told her that she was the best server we ever had and asked for her number so we could let her know when we'd be in so she could take her break with us. Went to a cute diner a few years ago, and though they had 2 hours till they stopped serving food, the place was practically empty. Our server took our salt and pepper shakers away before we got our food. Though I told her I would need it, she then refused to give me any salt or pepper for my meal. She said it was because we're closing soon. It was 9:30, and they closed at 11. I couldn't believe it. I asked if they were closing early, and she said that they were not. Left her no tip, and instead made a sad face and wrote, "I love salt. TLDR. Waitress refused to bring me salt or pepper, though the restaurant was over an hour from closing, and got no tip in return. No salt for you." This is why, if I leave cash, I always write out cash in the tip line, so it's obvious I didn't stiff someone on the tip. Not saying the waitress was right. She's a psycho B. Good on you for calling the cops, but that would have avoided the confusion. Besides, if the company doesn't reimburse tips, why bother putting in 37C in the tip line? I wouldn't have called the cops. I would have just put away my card and wallet, calmly walked back to the table, picked up the $10, held it up in front of me to show it to her, placed it in my pocket, and walked out. I'll bet that's the last time she pulls that crap, though. Depends how hard she hit him with the coins ammo. If she threw them with a lot of force directly at his face at close range, frick yes, I'm calling the cops. If she threw them lightly at him and a couple bounced off his cheek or something, I could understand not pressing charges, but being very upset and taking the tip back, demanding free check, etc. Calling the cops was valid. She assaulted you. Many people would have simply called over the manager and had her fired, but I support your decision. I also don't understand how she was not familiar with this method of tipping or how she thought being a bee about things would help. Some people don't think rationally. Those people often make mistakes like this. They need jobs too. Just don't keep them as long as others. I always tip in cash, no matter how I am paying. I do it to be nice to the server, who might otherwise not see much of that tip. Amazing that the server would not be familiar with our strategy, as I am sure others do it too. You did the right thing by calling the cops, I'd say. However, I would have first given her a chance to go to the table, see the tip, and apologize grovel. When you tip in cash, some servers pocket the entire tip instead of splitting it with the busboys and kitchen like they're supposed to. This is why I always tip on my card. You were totally well within your rights to call the police. Let's say you actually had stiffed her. That is still no excuse to whip change at you. I was a server for years and getting stiffed sometimes is part of the job. I had a similar situation and I took a much more subtle revenge. Two businessmen would come in from time to time with clients. After waiting on them a couple of times and receiving underwhelming tips, $2 on a $70 bill, I decided it was time to take action. They would always have a few mixed drinks while they were pitching their clients. I decided these men were going to get the service they were paying for. The next time they came in and ordered drinks, I made theirs doubles and made their clients with about half of a shot. So the clients were getting weak drinks and ordering round after round and the businessmen were forced to keep up. At the end of the meal the businessmen were visibly drunk, slurring their words, and eventually stumbling from the restaurant. They never came back. This is illegal in Australia. It's classified as drink spiking. There is one time that still sticks out to me. I have multiple sclerosis and was having an attack but had to continue working. I had a pretty significant limp due to this attack and was moving pretty slow but doing my best. There was a table of rednecks in my section who were asking for one thing at a time and generally running me around. Even though I was obviously trying my hardest, I made sure to go out of my way to be extra nice and apologetic. They were laughing about making me grab things one at a time and being snarky about everything. At the end of the meal, they paid and got up really quickly. When I went to bust some of the stuff off of the table, there was a huge zero in the tip line and it said "have a nice day." I think that is the day when I seriously lost faith in humanity. Have an upvote in return. I wish it was more significant though. Frick, this is going to be buried. So I had a table of 6 young girls. They ask how much everything is. Are breadsticks free? Is salad free? Is that refill free? 2 of them order a dish called grilled shrimp caprese. I bring it out and one girl says, "Oh, I don't like shrimp." I stand there, scoff a bit, and repeat what she said. She says, "Well, I don't like it cooked like this." "What do you mean I don't like it grilled?" Dumb. Dumb dumb dumb. So she gets the meal taken off and free dessert because my manager is an idiot. So does the other girl who decided she didn't like it halfway through. Their bill was about $70. They gave me cash and I said I'll be back with your change, which I say even when I'm pretty sure they just want me to keep the change. As I walk away I hear one of these little ghetto girls say, "Yeah, you bring back all of our change." I bring it back and they hurry out. I go to the table where a bus boy is cleaning and ask if there is a tip and he says I don't see it. All I see is this quarter. The table next to them told me that the girls were talking about doing it and how they thought it was so funny. All because some dumb girl ordered something she didn't like. Jerks. Not my worst, but my most recent. TLDR. Girl orders a dish called grilled shrimp caprese, then says she doesn't like grilled shrimp. They leave me a quarter and laugh about it. That sucks. Not so much a tipping horror story, but a strip club horror story. The strip club we went to sucked. Girls were kinda haggard and didn't put on a good show. Well, since we were drunk, we did what any self-respecting drunk does in the South, Waffle House. The waitress there was so awesome, putting up with 4 drunk guys and a sober underage guy, spilling drinks and very poorly trying to hit on her. She even cracked jokes on us. I tipped her the wad of $1 I didn't use at the strip club, which was around $70 total. Whenever I get good service, I leave a stripper tip. I felt they worked harder than a stripper. They should make more money than a stripper. Not that stripping is hard work. Usually a $20. This is from the other side. I had a waitress not serve me. Really? She took the order and she never came back. Instead, the busboy did everything. He was fine, but the waitress did nothing. The funny thing is that me and my wife were the only people in the place at the time. After being annoyed by her lack of service, I went to pay the bill. It was the type of place where you pay at the counter and she was also the one to pay. I walked up and stood there quietly for a good 3 minutes. I think I started to tap something just to pass the time and she asked what's that noise in an annoyed tone. It's then she realizes that I am standing there waiting to pay. Instead of apologizing, she says, you could have said something with a lot of attitude. My response was to plainly say I shouldn't have to. I pay the bill without tipping her, walk away, and hand the busboy the tip in cash. As I am walking out, I hear her say, "Don't you just love it when people don't tip you?" sarcastically. No, B, you did nothing and get no tip for it. I am normally a decent tipper. Could have been worse, but my first Saturday night shift ever and I was on the patio in the summer. Around 11 PM, I had a group of 15 men drinking. They ran me back and forth all night. I would bring one of them a beer, ask if anyone else needed anything. Another one would say they needed a beer, lather, rise and repeat until 1 AM. The whole time they kept sympathizing and saying, "Don't you worry, we're going to take care of you when it comes time to pay. Now, we can add 18% gratuity to parties of 8 or more." But I was so naive and confident that they were going to take care of me that I didn't add the gratuity. They didn't leave me a cent more than what their bill was. After they left, my manager looked at me and said, "I hope you learned tonight that even if it is a table of 8 nuns, you have that gratuity." I had a family come in, a couple and their 3 kids, to this beachy cafe I was working at. I worked as one of 3 waitresses. We served brunch, lunch and dinner for the owner, who was the only cook except a sous chef who came in at 3 PM. His son. The owner was in butthole. We had to moderate our own tickets. We couldn't let him have more than 4 tickets doing apps at a time. We had to hold them in our book until he worked through some of the existing tickets, and then hand them to him, because he got overwhelmed. But he was a fantastic chef, and food was excellent. Even though the wait was long, people generally left happy. Of course, every now and then you would get people who did not understand this bizarre "you have to wait for genius" concept at the restaurant and would stiff us on tips, which is why, contrary to the norm, we got paid $7 an hour, because the owner chef knew his ridiculous attitude would get us lower tips from some people. Anyway, this family comes in at 1 PM, and everyone wants burgers, all 5 of them. Now, the chef hates doing burgers, because he has to prep the grill, and it makes the kitchen hot. Why not just take them off the menu? It's not like there's a rule that every restaurant in the world has to have burgers. Anyway, he'd been having a bad day, so he tells me, no freaking way, not until 3 PM, when son comes home. So I go back to the table. They say we still want burgers. We'll wait. Okay, so I go back to the kitchen, which is semi-open, and this is a pretty small restaurant, so everyone can always hear this guy's profanity-laced tirades. I tell him they still want them. I'll hold the ticket until your son gets here. Well, frick them. If they want burgers, they should freaking go to McDonald's. Obviously the table heard, but they still clung to their burger dream, and their table in my zone. So hours pass. I keep giving them refills on soda, iced tea, all the bread in the world, free freaking ice cream from the adjoining ice cream shop for the kids. And finally, son comes in, burgers are cooked, served, service with an apology and smile, blah blah blah. So check is handed off, credit card is exchanged. I come back to the table and lo and behold, the freaking butthole dad took the time out of his day to write 0 all in caps on the tip line. I still wish I would have remembered to jot down his name so I could give him a piece of my mind about how, with full and complete disclosure, they still chose something off the menu that, for whatever a ridiculous reason it might be, would take over 2 hours to get, and it's not my effing fault. TLDR. Had table give a very deliberate $0 tip for a long wait that they were warned about. Now I really want to try these burgers. Vegetarian here. My restaurant experiences have been terrible and awesome. Worst, friends picked a restaurant, not knowing they had no real vegetarian options. Waitress came to take our orders and when it was my turn told me that I should have gone to a hippie place instead of wasting her time with my salad order, since salad was only an appetizer and not a meal. Her issue was that her tip would be less because I didn't spend any real money. Friends all proceeded to complain on my behalf and refused to leave her a tip. We did leave one for the kitchen staff, because they made me veggie nachos. Best, CPK waiter bought us 1 2-minute toasted pizzas and refused to charge us for the extra when he realized his mistake. Left him money for the extra one anyway and a 50% tip. Once I ordered a waffle and the waitress forgot it 3 times. She forgot it the first time I ordered it. She forgot it the first time I reminded her and the second time. I ended up not getting my mother fricking waffle. When I paid for my drink I didn't tip. She said you know service isn't included. Yes. B. I fricking know. You didn't serve me. I used to work at a nice place where, if somebody stiffed a waiter, the matron followed them out to their car and asked them with deliberate politeness if there was some problem with the service that they could address. Usually this would result in an embarrassed apology and claims of forgetfulness, as they reach for their wallet. Judging from the stories here, I have to ask, why don't more restaurants do this? Heck, if someone threw a handful of change at my face, mind you, the bit with the eyes and other sensitive parts, I'd probably call the cops too. Though I know I'd be hard pressed not to deck a man who did the same thing, even if at a business dinner. I am a waitress. One time I was having an awful shift. For example, kept putting orders in wrong, made mistakes, gave the wrong food to the wrong table, etc. I'm not a bad waitress. I was just having a crappy day. At the end of the night, 2 of our regular lovely male customers came in for coffees as they do every night at around 8 PM. They ordered the same drink but I mustn't have listened properly and put in the wrong drink. My colleague informed me that they said something when he took the drinks out. I flipped. How could I make such a simple mistake? How? I walked over and sat on the seat next to one of the men and apologized wholeheartedly for my mistake, explaining I was having a terrible day. I also paid for their drinks. They walked up to the counter later and not only paid for their drinks, but gave me a $15 tip. They said that the fact that I was so earnest about my apology that they thought I deserved it. The moral of the story, accept responsibility always, regardless of how much of a dong you might look like. TLDR. Got a $15 tip for failing and accepting responsibility. You made an honest mistake. You did the right thing by owning it. That doesn't make you look like a dong, that makes you look like a good person. Don't be so hard on yourself. I've waited tables for a long, horrible time, and I've never heard of a waiter retaliating like that over a small or non-existent tip. Not verbally or physically. I have heard waiters whine about it in the kitchen and make idle threats about tainting that customer's food when they come back, but I've never even seen anyone follow through on that. Leaving a bad tip is not even that high on the list of crappy things I've seen customers do to waiters. Anyway, leaving that stupid Christian pamphlet instead of a tip is worse. As the tipper, some sushi place, grouchy old B was rude to begin with so we let her slide. She took almost an hour to get our drinks and another hour to take our order. No refills, which were free. We left leaving no tip. She came back to us yelling that we must tip. So one of the females left her a $1 tip. We told her we weren't ever coming back. Also, before we even got seated, they were letting people come in after us take the tables while we waited for some reason. We only had 2 tables worth of people, but they kept giving our implied RSVP away. We were there for about 4 hours for 1 drink and maybe a roll of sushi or 2. And by 2 tables I mean no more than 8 people. That was about 4 years ago. I still don't go there. As the tippee, another old lady, I was a bagger, and we usually get some kind of $ amount for tips, and some change sometimes. So usually anywhere around $2 to $3 for 2 loaded carts of groceries, taken to your car and packed away. No hourly wage. So she's telling me about how she just bought this brand new 4W DBWM sedan, early mid 2003 Series 11, and how she had it special ordered from the manufacturer and how she had to pick it up and all that from Germany and just got it to Alaska, where I was at the time. She paid the cashier and the cashier asked if she wanted to pull some cash for a tip. You can request whatever amount you wanted. She declined. She had 2 full carts parked on the opposite side of the parking lot. Tipped 8 cents. $250 grocery bill. $40 K plus car. 8-cent tip. Thanks. One of the worst I've ever had. I was working at Outback Steakhouse and had a mother-daughter pair. Daughter was about 15-16. They were okay during the meal, but after they paid and left, I noticed they'd stiffed me. Not a big deal. Really, it happens. So not 5 minutes later they come back with a couple they'd ran into exiting the restaurant. They sat back down at the freshly bussed table to shoot the crap for an hour with only the mom having a single cup of coffee. Then they got up and walked out again. I normally wouldn't give a rat's butt about a cup of coffee, but not tipping me kinda had me a bit riled up. So I followed her out and presented her with the tab for the coffee. But dang if that woman didn't march my butt back into the restaurant and get my manager and totally berate me for charging her for coffee and making her feel like a thief in front of her friends, and after all that she tipped me. I said, "Mom, I received no tip from you, okay? This was a major faux pas on my part." Turns out the daughter thought the mom had left her change on the table and pocketed it. I got written up for mentioning a tip in front of the customer, and the manager bought the 4 of them dessert and still got no tip out of it. It's so awesome that I had the privilege to pay for that B to eat in my section. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.